The ambience of the jewelry store was peaceful, with the soft sound of lights and the distant murmur of conversations from customers and employees. In Charleston, South Carolina, the Sapphire Elegance jewelry store was a prestigious place where jewelry sparkled with promises of elegance and sophistication. The showcases, full of stunning pieces, captured the light of the room and reflected the stories of those who wore them. Eleanor, a woman with silver hair and a gentle countenance, entered the store's door. Her leather bag was a little worn, but that didn't take away the sparkle in her eyes, which moved from window to window with calm curiosity. She was already in her 70s, but her energy seemed undimmed by time. The smile on his face reflected an immense love for his family, especially his son, Michael. Eleanor felt immense pride when she walked through those doors, always looking for something simple to brighten Michael's day. That day, Eleanor had decided to surprise her. She would come over often, bringing a snack or something he liked, just to spend time with him. It was a way of maintaining the bond, of keeping joy in our hearts, but upon arriving, she was informed by one of the employees that Michael was in a meeting and would return soon. Eleanor then decided to stroll through the store, admiring the jewelry and letting herself be carried away by nostalgia. As he walked, his fingers touched the showcases lightly, as if he could feel the memories that each piece carried. His eyes fixed on an emerald ring, delicate and luminous. The intense shine of that green stone reminded her of a ring she owned in her youth, before life's hardships made her sell her jewelry. For a moment, he felt a weight in his chest, a silent longing. It was then that as she moved a little more to adjust her view of the ring, she noticed something that made her duck. Near the counter was a fallen gold ring, the ruby stone shining shyly in the light. Eleanor looked around, thinking it might have been from a distracted customer. With the ring in hand, Eleanor stood up and looked around, looking for an employee to return the item. When the saleswoman appeared in front of her, Eleanor couldn't help but notice the young woman's tense expression. She was tall and thin, with her hair tied up impeccably, but her gaze was cold, distant. Eleanor smiled softly, offering the ring. "I found this on the floor near the counter," Eleanor said, her tone friendly. "I wanted to return it." The saleswoman didn't respond immediately, her gaze fixed on the ring, but then she looked up at Eleanor, with an expression filled with suspicion. "Where did you find this?" he asked, his voice implacable. "Right here, near the counter," Eleanor replied, pointing. "I was just looking at the pieces and saw the ring fall out." The saleswoman took a step forward, her face hardening. "I can't believe you found this. What were you really doing?" Eleanor was surprised by the implied accusation and took a step back, gripping the ring more firmly. "I was just returning what I found," she said, trying to remain calm. "I don't know why You're trying to steal, aren't you?" the saleswoman interrupted, her tone of accusation as sharp as a knife. "Trying to take home a piece that isn't yours." The air felt heavy, and Eleanor felt her stomach tighten. "I didn't steal anything." She tried to maintain her composure, but her voice cracked a little. "I just found the ring, and I'm returning it. It's no big deal. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to support the channel. Click like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our next stories. Your subscription makes all the difference and helps us continue to bring you exciting and engaging content like this." The saleswoman looked her up and down, assessing her appearance. His gaze flicked over Eleanor's simple coat, her worn shoes, and her aged purse. The saleswoman's expression became even colder, as if she had seen everything she needed to see. "I knew it," she muttered dismissively. "People like you always have an excuse." The words fell heavy, like stones in a calm lake. Eleanor tried not to show her pain, but humiliation was inevitable. She just wanted to help, return the lost ring, but now she was being treated as if she were a criminal. The saleswoman came forward, forcefully taking the ring from Eleanor's hands, almost knocking her over in the process. "You'll forgive me," she said, teeth clenched, "but I'm going to call security. I'm not going to let this go." Eleanor felt her heart quicken. Confusion took over her as the saleswoman's words echoed in her mind. "Security? This is ridiculous. I just found the ring." he begged, but the saleswoman was already walking away, picking up the phone, indifferent to the request. The saleswoman, with a cold and calculated expression, ignored Eleanor's pleas. She picked up the phone with steady hands, her voice low and controlled as she spoke to the operator. "I need help here at Sapphire Elegance. We found a lady trying to steal a diamond ring. She's under our surveillance now." Eleanor slowly backed away, her body tense, and her fingers gripping the strap of her bag tightly, as if that would stop the whirlwind of emotions that were beginning to take over her. She couldn't believe what was happening. The next few minutes passed in a whirlwind of sounds and movements. Eleanor barely noticed the store door open, or the quick footsteps of 2 police officers entering, their uniforms impeccable and their faces impassive. They went directly to the saleswoman, who, with a dramatic expression, began to accuse her. "This lady," the saleswoman declared, pointing at Eleanor with a firm gesture, "was caught trying to steal this ring. I was forced to intervene before she got away." Eleanor tried to compose herself, but her hands shook uncontrollably as she spoke. "I didn't steal anything," she said, her voice breaking between shock and fear. "Please, it's a mistake. I'm the store owner's mother," she tried to explain, her voice wavering, looking at the officers with hope. However, the 2 officers exchanged a quick look, but kept their focus on the saleswoman. One of them, the tallest, turned to Eleanor, his expression impassive. "Ma'am, please accompany us," he said firmly, taking a step toward her. Eleanor took a step back, fear tightening her chest. "This is a mistake," she pleaded, her voice barely audible. But before she could say more, the officer grabbed her arm tightly, pulling her to the side. The sudden movement unbalanced her, and she almost fell. Panic gripped Eleanor as she felt her hands being pinned behind her back. "What are you doing?" she screamed, her voice full of despair. The sound of the metal cuffs closing around his wrists reverberated in his mind. "I didn't do anything wrong," she exclaimed, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her desperate gaze searched for someone, anyone who could help her, but her eyes only met the saleswoman's triumphant expression. "This is a mistake," Eleanor pleaded, but one of the officers, emotionless, replied, "You'll have a chance to explain everything at the station." The saleswoman's words cut through the air like sharp blades, leaving Eleanor speechless. She, who had already overcome so many challenges throughout her life, never imagined that one day she would be treated with such cruelty. The humiliation he felt was almost unbearable. As the officers guided her toward the door, their hands steady and impassive, Eleanor's mind was in a whirl. How was this happening? That store, Sapphire Elegance, was his son Michael's business, a place he always considered a refuge, a space of pride and security. How had it suddenly turned into a nightmarish stage? When they were almost at the door, a deep and authoritative voice cut through the silence of the store. "What's going on here?" The police officers stopped abruptly, and Eleanor turned, her heart racing, to find the source of the voice. His eyes widened when he saw Michael standing at the entrance, his face mixing surprise and indignation. He remained motionless for a moment before moving forward with quick, purposeful steps. He wore a slightly wrinkled suit, as if he had interrupted a meeting to run there. His face was lined with tension, and his posture exuded authority as he surveyed the scene before him. His mother, handcuffed, teary-eyed, the police officers holding her tightly, and the saleswoman standing with a smug smile. "Take it away from her now," Michael ordered, his voice controlled but with palpable anger. One of the officers cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. "Sir, we were responding to a report of a robbery." "I said take off the handcuffs," Michael repeated, the firmness of his voice making it clear that he accepted no further arguments. His eyes darkened with the fury he tried to control. He approached Eleanor, his face softening slightly as he placed a hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay, Mum?" Eleanor nodded shakily, her voice breaking. "I didn't do anything, Michael. I just picked up a dropped ring. I didn't do anything wrong." Michael then turned to the saleswoman, his eyes sharp and cold. "Miss Parker, could you explain to me why exactly you thought calling the police on my mother was the most sensible solution?" The saleswoman hesitated, her face turning pale. I didn't know she was your mother," She picked up the ring that was on the floor and, well, it looked like she was trying to get it for herself. Her voice wavered as she tried to justify her attitude. Michael looked at her with an icy gaze. "Did you know that my mother was just trying to return what she found, and yet you decided to treat her like a criminal?" He shook his head, exasperated. "I never imagined I would have to face something like this inside my own store." He turned to Miss Parker, his gaze turning icy. "Miss Parker, what do you have to say about this? Why did you accuse my mother without knowing the truth?" The saleswoman swallowed hard, clearly surprised by the accusation. I didn't know who she was," he said, the confidence from before disappearing. "She took the ring and looked like she was trying to hide it." Michael looked at her with disdain. "And that was enough for you? To assume that an elderly lady was trying to steal from her own store?" "I just wanted to protect the store," muttered Miss Parker, now clearly uncomfortable. "Protect my mother's store?" Michael interrupted, his voice rising. "You insulted my mother, and by extension, all the work my family and I put into this place." Miss Parker was silent, not knowing how to respond. Michael turned to the police, his patience at its limit. "Do you really think my mother is a criminal? Because of an assumption?" The police officers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Finally, one of them stepped forward and, with a reluctant gesture, removed Eleanor's handcuffs. Michael walked over to her, touching her shoulders gently, relieved to see her free. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, his voice low and full of guilt. "It should never have happened." Eleanor, still in shock, looked at him, trying to understand how this had all unfolded. "I just found the ring on the floor, and now I'm being treated like a criminal." Michael took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on the saleswoman. "This ends now," he said firmly. "Miss Parker, you are fired. I do not tolerate this type of behavior in my store." The saleswoman turned pale, her posture wavering. "Please, sir, I didn't know." "I don't care," Michael cut in, voice cold. "Get out of my store now." She, shaking, picked up her belongings and left without looking back, leaving the store in tense silence. Michael turned to the officers, his anger evident. "What about you? A simple apology is all my mother deserves after everything she's been through here." Dryden, one of the officers, clearly embarrassed, cleared his throat. "Sorry, Ma'am, we're just following protocol." "Protocol?" Michael repeated in disbelief. "You didn't investigate anything. You just acted on an unfounded accusation." The other officer looked at Eleanor with regret. "Sorry, ma'am, it was a mistake." Eleanor looked at the officers, her expression calm, but filled with a silent dignity. She didn't say a word, just nodded, leaving the weight of the situation silent. Michael led her to a chair near the store counter, his gestures soft, as if he wanted to convey a little comfort. "Sit down, Mom," he said in a calm tone, placing his hand on her shoulder as a protective gesture. "I'll sort it out." As Eleanor settled in, her hands still shaking, Michael turned to the officers, his gaze now firm and authoritative. "You can leave now. I will make a formal complaint about your treatment of my mother." The police officers exchanged glances, but reluctantly nodded and left. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of the door closing behind them. Michael knelt beside Eleanor, his expression softening as he looked at his mother. "Are you okay, Mom? Do you need anything?" Eleanor shook her head slowly, her hand touching his gently. "I just want to go home," she whispered, still processing what had happened. Michael let out a deep sigh, relief mixed with frustration visible on his face. "We will, Mom, but first I'll make sure this never happens again." Over the next few days, the situation turned into a whirlwind of phone calls, documents, and legal meetings. Michael did not hesitate to file formal complaints against the police officers and Miss Parker, accusing her of physical and moral abuse against Eleanor. Eleanor, although shaken, supported her son's decision. She knew this wasn't just for her, but to prevent someone else from going through the same humiliation. The news spread quickly. Sapphire Elegance jewelry, once recognized for its elegance and sophistication, was now at the center of a controversy about prejudice and ethics. Many customers supported Michael's actions, while others questioned the decision to publicly fire Miss Parker. Michael was firm in his stance. "There is no room for this type of behavior in my business, and there should be no room in any other." Meanwhile, Miss Parker faced the consequences of her actions. Security camera recordings clearly showed what happened. The moment she pushed Eleanor, completely ignoring her explanations and her aggressive treatment during the situation. The video also captured the officer's harsh behavior, which only increased public outrage. In court, Miss Parker's presence was almost unrecognizable. The pride and confidence she displayed in the store had given way to a diminutive, almost shrunken posture. Sitting at the defense table, her hands shook, her eyes avoided contact, as if reality itself had hit her hard. She seemed much smaller now, a shadow of the authoritarian woman who had wrongly accused Eleanor. Michael stood his ground, watching every move in the courtroom with grim determination. He knew his mother, Eleanor, didn't need to relive that nightmare. With the support of her lawyer, they chose not to call her to testify, as the emotional weight of the situation would be too great. Instead, the prosecutor brought to light a series of evidence that highlighted the seriousness of the accusation against Miss Parker. The footage from the store clearly showed the moment of the attack. The video didn't lie. The saleswoman had not only accused Eleanor without reason, but had treated her brutally, refusing to listen to the lady's explanations. The police officer's statements also corroborated the narrative, recognizing that they had acted hastily, without paying due attention to what had actually happened. Michael watched the process with a mixed feeling of justice and pain. He knew that what had happened that day could not be erased by a sentence, but he felt that at least the truth was being recognized. The trial, although important, was just a step. He already had in mind that the impact of this experience should be greater, that there should be a real change, not just in his mother's case, but in the way people deal with prejudice and discrimination in their society. As the case unfolded, Eleanor, although relieved by the absence of a statement from her, experienced a mix of emotions. The pain of being treated like a criminal, of being humiliated in such a public way, didn't just disappear with the verdict. She knew she was receiving justice, but the weight of humiliation was still there, in every memory, in every gesture of contempt that she still felt deep in her soul. The sound of the handcuffs, the slap that marked her, and the judgmental looks of others were vivid memories that she couldn't erase. When the jury found Miss Parker guilty of assault and defamation, the room filled with collective relief. The judge, with a sentence aimed at rehabilitation, ordered her to perform community service and participate in a sensitivity course, a necessary step so that she, perhaps, understands the seriousness of her actions. Outside the courtroom, reporters were in force, surrounding Michael and Eleanor, awaiting statements. With the same unwavering stance he had demonstrated throughout the process, Michael spoke firmly. Her voice resonated with clarity, a commitment to change. Today, we are not just seeking justice for my mother. We are saying out loud that no one else should experience this kind of treatment. Discrimination and prejudice have no place in our society, and we must all fight to ensure this never happens again. Michael's words echoed, and the surrounding community, represented by cameras and watchful eyes, seemed to absorb the magnitude of his statement. Eleanor's case had become a symbol of resistance, a call to action for all those who believed in equality and respect. Eleanor, beside Michael, spoke with impressive calm, but her voice exuded a firmness that resonated throughout the packed room. "My life has been long," she began, with a serene but determined look. "I've been through a lot, but I still believe in my son, and I believe we can do more. We can be better." Her words touched the souls of everyone around. The crowd murmured in agreement, and the cameras captured that moment with a precision that seemed to freeze time. It was a personal moment for them, but also a message of change, of a future where justice was more than an empty word. In the days that followed, a sense of closure began to form, but it was accompanied by deep reflection. Eleanor knew that although there was justice in that moment, the weight of what had happened would not easily disappear. She still bore the scars of humiliation, but instead of letting her weaken, those scars became a source of strength. Michael, for his part, remained by her side, attentive and careful. He knew his mother didn't need any more pain, just support. Within sapphire elegance, Michael began a process of transformation. He knew that what had happened could not be erased, but he had the power to change the future. Organized training sessions for the entire team, focusing on empathy, diversity, and respect. He brought in experts to talk about social issues that were often ignored, and at every step he regained the community's trust. Michael wanted his store to be a symbol of change, an example of doing things right. Eleanor, in turn, found a new rhythm in her life. She began coming to the store again, not just as a customer, but as someone who was now treated with consideration she had never had before. Although the incident had left its mark, it had also made her stronger, more resolute in her belief that she did not need to be defined by a single event. One afternoon, as they shared a cup of tea in Michael's office, Eleanor looked at her son with a soft but proud smile. "You did a good job," she said, her voice sweet but filled with significant weight, not just with the store, but with the way he stood up for what is fair. Michael, touching her hand with an affectionate gesture, responded with a humble smile. "I learned from the best," he said, with a softness that only his children know how to convey. "You taught me everything about how to be strong, how to be resilient." In Charleston, Eleanor and Michael's story spread quickly, gaining traction and becoming a point of reflection for many people. The debate about discrimination and liability was no longer limited to small circles. It was taking over cafes, squares, and even social media in the city. Their experience reverberated not only in Charleston, but in several neighboring communities, bringing to light deep questions about empathy and justice. One day, as Eleanor was preparing to leave Michael's jewelry store, he walked her to the door. The sun was beginning to set, turning the sky orange and gold, and the street was lighting up softly. Eleanor stopped for a moment to take in the scenery, taking a deep breath. When he looked at his son, the wisdom in his eyes was unmistakable. "I know this path hasn't been easy for you," she said calmly, but with immense conviction. "But you managed to turn something very painful into something bigger. That's how you create change." Michael was silent for a moment, reflecting. "We still have a lot to do, Mom. We can't stop here." Eleanor smiled softly, her eyes reflecting silent hope. "Change starts one step at a time, and you've already taken many." As he walked away, the soft sound of the bell on the shop door rang, something that had previously gone unnoticed, but now carried a deep meaning. It was a constant reminder that true transformation begins with courage and determination. Eleanor knew that although the world was still far from fair, she and Michael had taken an important step toward creating a better future. A future built by acts of courage, reflection, and most of all, action. If you liked this story, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Here, you will find exciting stories every day made to touch your heart. And I'm sure that the story that's appearing on the screen now will move you too. Don't miss it.